The cold void of space stretched out like an endless ocean, empty and vast. A single streak of light shot across the dark sky as a high-powered satellite sped around Earth's orbit. The hum of its engines filled the silent cabin of the space station, far removed from the bustling noise of Earth. But today, something was different. The monitor on the control panel flashed an alert. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight flicker. Then the screen blinked once more, faster now, until a new message appeared, bold and red: unidentified object detected. The station's crew, a small team of scientists and military personnel, gathered around the control center in disbelief. The object was not just close, it was already within Earth's orbit. There was no warning, no detection. The object appeared out of thin air. "No way," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Granger, the station's commander. She leaned closer to the screen, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "That wasn't on any of our scans. There's no way it's a satellite or debris." Her voice was shaky, but she forced herself to remain calm. The rest of the team stood behind her, wide-eyed, unsure of what they were seeing. No one had been prepared for this. The object was a massive, dark silhouette against the stars. It appeared to be stationary, floating in space with eerie silence. "Any comms?" asked Dr. Alex Hernandez, the station's lead scientist. He was already typing commands on his keyboard, trying to make contact with the object, but the results were unsettling. The usual channels of communication were dead. No signals. No response. "We're getting nothing," Sarah replied. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath the surface. "The object is just there." Dr. Hernandez turned back to the screen, his fingers tapping nervously. The object wasn't moving. It was as though it had always been there, as though it had just slipped into existence, as though it had always been watching them. The strange silhouette hovered against the stars, imposing and ominous. Suddenly, another alarm went off, this one far more intense, blaring through the station's corridors. The crew rushed to the source of the sound, only to find the outer sensors blinking red. "Sir, the object is," the voice of Sergeant Ben Parks, one of the station's communications officers, faltered as he checked the data. "It's moving. Very slowly." Everyone froze. The object was not stationary anymore. It was shifting, and its movements were unnatural, too deliberate. It wasn't a piece of space debris. It wasn't anything they had ever encountered. The team watched as the object began to rotate. The light from the distant sun reflected off its dark surface, revealing its true nature. It was no ordinary ship. It was vast. Unlike any spacecraft known to humanity. The entire vessel seemed to absorb the surrounding light, as if it were a black hole in the void. There were no lights, no markings, and no visible signs of life. It was like a ghost ship. "What the hell is it?" Sarah muttered, her hands gripping the edge of the console. "Any chance it's a mistake?" asked Sergeant Parks, his voice tinged with anxiety. "A malfunction, maybe?" "Not a chance," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I've seen those errors before. This is something else. Something we don't understand." The object continued to drift through space, its movements deliberate and eerie. And then, as if in response to their thoughts, a single blinding flash lit up the screen. The room was bathed in a sudden, harsh light. "God," Dr. Hernandez gasped. "It's transmitting." The crew recoiled in shock. The signal was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't like anything humans had ever built. The waveform was alien, not just in its shape but in its sheer complexity. No human technology could produce such a signal. It was too advanced, too sophisticated. "I thought we were alone," Sergeant Parks muttered under his breath. He couldn't keep his eyes off the screen. It wasn't just a ship. It wasn't just a vessel from a distant planet. It was something else entirely. something ancient. And whatever it wasn't here by accident. The blinding flash on the monitor faded, but the eerie silence remained. The object was still there, hovering, observing. No message. No answer. Just a presence. A sense that something was watching them from afar. Sarah's gut told her they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. She turned to the team, her face pale. Prepare to initiate a manned mission. We need to get up close. What? Ben exclaimed. Are you serious? We have no idea what we're dealing with. It could be dangerous. I'm not asking for your opinion, Sergeant, Sarah snapped, though her voice held no malice. We have to investigate. The entire world is going to want answers, and we can't give them if we don't know what's going on. Ben looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. The gravity of the situation was too heavy. They didn't have a choice. They had to act. As Sarah turned back to the control panel, she set the course to launch a reconnaissance mission. Dr. Hernandez moved to another console and began inputting data, trying to decipher the alien signal. There's one more thing, Dr. Hernandez muttered. I've been analyzing the frequency. It's not just a transmission. It's like a beacon. A beacon? Sarah asked, her voice rising. A signal to call more of them here? Hernandez nodded grimly. We can't be sure yet. But if that's what it is. The implications were immediate and terrifying. They were not alone. Whatever this ship was, it was not a lone visitor. It had a purpose. And the world was about to find out just how serious that purpose was. Moments later, the shuttle was prepared for launch. The crew, suited in advanced spacesuits, moved toward the airlock. It was a somber affair, with everyone moving in silence. The weight of the unknown hung over them. They were about to board the first alien vessel humanity had ever encountered. Nothing about this was going to be easy. Nothing was going to be simple. Sarah led the group, her voice steady. We don't know what we're going to find. Stay alert. Stay focused. One by one, the team entered the shuttle, their faces tense with fear, but also with the anticipation of discovery. The hatch sealed, and the shuttle shot away from the space station, toward the massive black ship that loomed in front of them. The trip felt endless, the vastness of space pressing down on them, suffocating. The shuttle was small and fragile against the enormity of the object they were heading toward. The black ship hovered in space, unyielding and silent, as if it were waiting for them. As they approached, the shuttle's instruments began to go haywire. The navigation systems flickered. The radio crackled with static. The closer they got, the more unstable their equipment became. Something's interfering with our systems, said Parks, his voice tense. It's like they're shutting us out. Push through, Sarah ordered. We need to land. The shuttle finally docked, but the entire process felt like they were intruding on something ancient. The hatch opened, and the team stepped out into the cold, dark emptiness of the alien ship. Inside, it was unlike anything they had expected. The corridors were vast, stretching into nothingness. The walls were smooth, unyielding, and black, reflecting the dim light from their helmets. There was no sign of life, no indication of any inhabitants, but the air felt strange. A strange, oppressive silence filled the ship. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Stay together, Sarah commanded. They walked deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Each corner they turned revealed more unsettling sights. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever built. It was too advanced, too intricate. It felt alien in every sense of the word. And then, without warning, the ship shuddered. The lights flickered on, a faint glow coming from deep within the ship. A low, humming sound vibrated through the metal walls. The ship was alive. It was waking up. Suddenly, a flashing light appeared on the control panel of the shuttle. It was a message. You have arrived. But there was no one there to send it. No voice, no figure. Only the ship. Only the silence. The atmosphere inside the alien ship was oppressive. A cold, metallic scent lingered in the air, and the silence stretched out like an endless void, broken only by the occasional hum of the ship's strange technology. The team stood frozen, staring at the message that had appeared on their shuttle's control panel. It was brief, cryptic, and more unnerving than anything they had ever encountered. You have arrived. The words were simple, but the implications were anything but. They had no idea who had sent it. There was no voice, no figure, just the ship, silent and unmoving, yet somehow brimming with an undeniable presence. Sarah Granger, the mission commander, stepped forward, her mind racing. What do we do now? She muttered to herself. It was a question that hadn't really had an answer, at least not until now. They had no plan. No protocol for first contact with an alien race. What did they even know about these beings? Nothing. Everything was based on guesses, assumptions, and instincts. The crew stood in a tight group, the weight of their unknown situation pressing on them from all sides. The ship's eerie stillness seemed to absorb all the sound, even their breathing felt muffled. Do you think it's a trap? Sergeant Ben Parks asked, his voice tight. I mean, this thing could be dangerous. We don't know what we're walking into. Maybe it's a test, Dr. Alex Hernandez suggested, his voice tinged with the excitement of discovery. Maybe they're watching us, seeing how we'll react. We have to approach with caution. Caution? Parks scoffed, his hand resting on the weapon holstered at his side. It's already been made clear that whatever is on this ship isn't exactly friendly. We've been sent a message, but it feels like we're walking right into the unknown. Sarah turned to face him. We've already crossed that line, Ben. We're already here. We can't turn back now. She paused, meeting each of their eyes. We need to find answers. We need to understand what this ship is and why it's here. We need to know who, or what, sent that message. The team fell silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. The reality of the situation was settling in. They were in uncharted territory. There was no manual, no instructions, no framework to follow. And for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility resting squarely on her shoulders. She wasn't just leading a mission, she was leading humanity's first direct encounter with an extraterrestrial presence. Without another word, she turned and began walking deeper into the dark expanse of the ship. The crew followed her, their boots clicking against the cold, smooth floors. The ship seemed endless. Every hallway they passed led to another, stretching off into infinity. It was hard to get a sense of direction here, everything feeling the same. The walls were made of the same black, featureless material, and the air tasted of something sterile, something artificial. As they moved further into the ship, they came to a massive chamber. The size of the room was staggering. It was unlike any place they had seen before, vast and open, with a ceiling that seemed to go on forever. In the center of the room was a towering structure, a column of dark metal that rose high above them. It pulsed faintly with light, but the light was not warm or welcoming. It was cold, mechanical. What is this? Dr. Hernandez whispered, his voice full of awe. Sarah didn't answer right away. She was too busy taking in every detail, scanning for any clue that might help them understand the ship. This room seemed to be the heart of the vessel, and the column at its center felt like the epicenter of whatever force was driving it. The structure appeared both organic and artificial, as if it had been grown rather than built. It shimmered, as though its surface was constantly shifting. What do you think it is? Ben asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon, though he knew better than to draw it. I'm not sure, Sarah said. But it looks important. Stay alert. They moved closer to the column, trying to make sense of its strange design. The closer they got, the more they felt a sensation of being drawn toward it, as if the column itself was pulling them in. The air in the room felt thicker, heavier, as though they were crossing into another realm, something beyond their understanding. Suddenly, the column began to hum. A low, vibrating sound filled the room, and the light around them flickered. The floor beneath their feet vibrated, causing them all to steady themselves. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, until it reached a crescendo, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The column emitted a soft, rhythmic pulse of light, slowly at first, and then faster, until it was almost a strobe. The crew stood motionless, eyes wide. What was happening? Was this some kind of communication? Was the ship trying to tell them something? And then, without warning, the floor beneath them gave way. The group barely had time to react as the ground beneath them cracked open, and they plunged into the darkness below. They awoke to an unfamiliar world. The fall seemed to last forever. When they finally landed, it was not a harsh crash but a gentle descent into something soft, something unexpected. Sarah opened her eyes slowly, the darkness around her swallowing everything. But as her eyes adjusted, she could make out faint, glowing lines etched into the ground. They pulsed in time with the strange light in the chamber above. The column had vanished. "Everyone okay?" she called out, her voice hoarse, but strong. Her team groaned in reply, slowly getting to their feet. The fall had been disorienting, but no one seemed seriously hurt. They were alive, but the situation was far from safe. "What happened?" Dr. Hernandez asked, brushing himself off and looking around. "Where are we?" Sarah stood up, scanning the area. The walls around them were different from what they had seen above. Here, the space was smaller, confined, and the air felt warmer, almost breathable. The faint glowing lines on the floor led them down a narrow corridor. The walls were made of the same strange material as the rest of the ship, but the floor was softer, and the faint hum of machinery filled the air. "I don't know," Sarah said. "But we need to keep moving. Something's not right about this place. We have to find answers, and we can't afford to get distracted." The team moved cautiously down the corridor. The air was dense, thick with a sense of anticipation. As they walked, they began to notice the subtle changes in the atmosphere. The walls seemed to shift, the glowing lines on the floor leading them deeper into the heart of the ship. It was like the ship itself was guiding them, urging them forward. But why? Then, ahead of them, something caught their attention. A faint light glowed in the distance, flickering like a star in the dark. They quickened their pace, the sense of urgency mounting as they approached. What was this light? Was it another beacon? A sign of life? Or something far worse? As they reached the end of the corridor, they found themselves in another large chamber. The light they had seen was coming from the center, where a series of complex, geometric shapes spun in midair. The shapes rotated slowly, creating an intricate web of light and shadow that filled the entire room. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. At the center of the spinning shapes was a large pedestal, and on it lay a small, glowing object, something they could not identify. Sarah's heart raced. Was this the key to understanding the ship? Was this what had drawn them here? She stepped forward, but before she could reach out to touch the object, a voice echoed through the chamber. "Do not touch it." The voice was deep, resonant, and ancient. It filled the room, reverberating in their minds. They froze, each one of them gripped by a mix of fear and awe. The voice was not coming from any one source. It surrounded them, coming from the walls, the air, the very ship itself. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound confident. The voice was silent for a moment. Then, it answered. "We are the architects. The creators of all things. And you "You are trespassing." The voice echoed once more in the chamber, sending a chill down the spines of every member of the crew. Its reverberations didn't just fill the air, they settled into their bones. The ship itself seemed to pulse, its unseen heart beating in time with their own racing pulses. The warning was clear, and the weight of it hung over them like a dark cloud. "You are trespassing." Sarah Granger's breath hitched. The words felt like a sentence, and the implications were immediately terrifying. She wasn't just hearing this from a ship, she was hearing it from something that called itself the Architects, and they had made it clear they weren't happy with humanity's presence here. But what did that mean? Why had they come in the first place? What did the Architects want from them? Sarah's mind raced as she scanned the glowing pedestal before them. The object upon it pulsed softly with an eerie, inviting light. It seemed to shimmer in defiance of the bleak atmosphere. But Sarah, though tempted, knew they could not act recklessly. She held out her hand to stop her team from advancing further. They had to figure out what this place was, what these beings were, before doing anything else. The voice spoke again, this time softer but no less commanding. "You are not ready to understand. You have seen what you should not." We don't understand what's happening here," Sarah said, her voice steady but full of uncertainty. She took a cautious step forward, trying to show resolve. "We came here seeking answers. We need to know who you are and why we are here." There was a long pause, during which the crew stood still, barely breathing. The lights in the chamber flickered, casting odd shadows across the walls as the voice filled the space once more. "Answers? You seek answers where none are meant to be given. Your kind is unprepared for such knowledge. The truth is a burden, and you will find it heavy." The room grew colder. Sarah felt the chill seep into her skin, a deep, uncomfortable cold that made her shiver involuntarily. The voice's warning weighed heavily on her. How could they possibly understand what they were up against? What did the Architects mean by the truth? What were they trying to protect from them? Suddenly, Dr. Alex Hernandez, usually the calmest of the group, took a step forward. His curiosity was getting the better of him, and he could not contain it any longer. "What do you mean?" "We have the right to know. Humanity has the right to understand what this ship is and why we are here." His voice trembled slightly, despite his best efforts to sound strong. The response from the ship came immediately. "You do not understand. You cannot. It is beyond your comprehension. But you will learn soon enough, whether you wish it or not." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate once more. The air felt denser now, thicker with a sense of impending doom. The glowing pedestal before them pulsed brighter, and a series of faint, metallic clicks echoed throughout the chamber. Ben Parks moved forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. He was on edge, the adrenaline from their earlier encounter with the ship still coursing through his veins. Sarah quickly held up a hand to stop him. "Hold off, Ben. We need to think this through." But Ben's eyes never left the pedestal. "Are you serious? These beings are telling us we're not ready for this knowledge. They might be dangerous, Sarah." Sarah understood his fear. The ship's behavior, the ominous warning, it was clear that they were dealing with something far beyond their capabilities. But this was history in the making. They couldn't simply turn back now. Not without knowing what lay at the heart of this mystery. The voice came again, this time more insistent, like a growing storm. "You are not meant to interfere. You have no place here. We will show you, and you will understand." Before anyone could react, the pedestal began to rise. It levitated from its place, the light around it growing blindingly bright. The crew shielded their eyes as the object at its center pulsed violently. The vibrations in the air intensified, and the chamber around them seemed to shrink in on itself. The walls flickered, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the ground beneath them seemed to disappear. Then, the light exploded. It wasn't a flash or a burst, it was an overwhelming wave of raw, unfathomable energy that slammed into them. Sarah felt it first in the pit of her stomach, an intense pressure, then across her chest, a force that squeezed the air from her lungs. Her vision blurred, the edges of her sight darkening, and for a moment, she thought she might lose consciousness. Her heart raced, and her skin prickled as though 1,000 needles were driving into her. But it wasn't pain. It was something else, something indescribable. Her mind seemed to expand, her senses sharpening to an extreme degree, as if she could hear every single vibration of the ship, every pulse of energy. And then, it came. The knowledge. Visions rushed into her mind, flashes of stars, planets, galaxies. She saw civilizations rising and falling, creatures of unimaginable forms, all dancing in the vastness of space. The architects. They were not just beings, they were the creators, the ones who shaped the universe. Their influence was felt on every world, in every life, in every atom of existence. Sarah was shown their history, their purpose, their connection to everything in the cosmos. She saw worlds that had never been seen by human eyes, burning, falling into chaos. But she also saw creation, the birth of stars, of life, of intelligent beings. And as the visions continued, one thing became abundantly clear: the architects had not just created life, they had controlled it. They had manipulated the very fabric of the universe. They had shaped the fate of entire civilizations with a mere thought. And Sarah understood. She understood what it meant to trespass here. The knowledge was a gift, yes, but it was also a curse. The architects were not just protectors of secrets, they were guardians of the truth, a truth so dangerous that it had to be hidden from all but the most enlightened. And the truth was this: knowledge, real knowledge, was too powerful for most to bear. Those who possessed it could change the course of history, but they could also destroy it. When the light finally faded, Sarah was left gasping for breath. The others were in similar states, clutching at their heads, shaking their limbs, as though waking from a nightmare. "What the hell just happened?" Ben said, his voice shaky. Sarah turned to him, her mind racing. The answer was simple, yet terrifying. "We've seen something we shouldn't have. And now we have to face the consequences." The voice returned, echoing through the chamber. "You have seen what you should not. Now you must decide, will you continue? Will you accept the burden of the knowledge you have gained, or will you turn back?" Sarah stood there, staring into the pulsing light of the pedestal. The weight of the decision pressed down on her like a physical force. There was no turning back now. The truth had been revealed to them, but it was not a gift. It was a test. And they would have to face the consequences. Her crew looked to her for guidance. Every one of them was shaken by what they had experienced. The truth was clear in their eyes, even if they couldn't fully comprehend it yet. Sarah took a deep breath. There was no easy way forward. There were only choices, decisions that would shape the fate of their species, the fate of this ship, and the fate of whatever was out there, waiting in the cold, infinite void of space. "We move forward," Sarah said, her voice strong despite the fear that lingered in her chest. "We need answers. We can't stop now." The architect's voice responded, this time softer, almost approving. "Then the trial begins." The air in the chamber was thick, almost suffocating, with the lingering weight of the knowledge they had just absorbed. Sarah Granger's mind was reeling from the visions, the revelations that had torn through her like a violent storm. Her thoughts were fragmented, flashes of unfamiliar worlds, alien life forms, and the shocking truth of the architects. It was like being pulled into a reality that was far beyond anything humanity had ever known. Her crew, too, was struggling with the aftermath. Dr. Alex Hernandez clutched his head as if trying to force the images out of his mind, his face pale, his usual calm demeanor shattered. Ben Parks, the ship's security officer, stood by the door, his eyes darting nervously, the weight of the unknown pressing on him. His hand hovered near his sidearm, though he knew the weapons they carried would be useless against whatever lay ahead. Sarah didn't need to look at them to know they were all in the same state, torn between awe and terror, between the desire for knowledge and the fear of what they had just uncovered. But she couldn't afford to lose herself in the confusion. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. The architects had made it clear, once they had seen the truth, there was no going back. They had to move forward, or risk being lost to the endless depths of space, consumed by their own ignorance. A faint hum filled the room, and Sarah's attention snapped back to the pedestal. It was still glowing softly, its light now pulsing rhythmically, as if alive. As if aware of them, watching them. The ship seemed to be alive in a way they could barely comprehend, its very presence an enigma. "We need to figure out what this is," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What they want from us." Alex's voice trembled as he spoke, breaking the silence. "Sarah, the things we saw, they're not just ancient beings. The architects, if that's even what they are beyond anything we've encountered. We're not just dealing with technology. We're dealing with a force that can shape reality itself." Ben scoffed. "I don't care about philosophy, document. I care about survival. We need to know if we're dealing with something that will kill us or something we can work with." Sarah turned to Ben, her gaze hard. "We don't have that luxury right now. The truth has been thrust upon us. The architects are not offering us answers, Ben. They're offering us a choice. A choice we need to make carefully." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over them. For a moment, none of them spoke, each of them lost in their own thoughts, processing the gravity of what had just happened. But then, the pedestal seemed to react, a sharp, sudden pulse of light flooding the room. A series of mechanical noises filled the air, and the walls of the chamber began to shift, retracting to reveal a hidden passageway. The entire ship seemed to groan in response, as if waking from a long slumber. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The ship was alive. It was aware of them. And it was guiding them somewhere. "There's no going back now," Sarah whispered. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The crew was with her, at least for now. They had to trust each other if they were going to make it through this. With a glance at her team, Sarah began to walk toward the newly revealed passage. Her steps were steady, but inside, her stomach churned with uncertainty. What awaited them in the depths of the black ship? Were they ready for what lay beyond? The passage was narrow, the walls smooth and dark, almost like a tunnel carved into the heart of the ship. They walked in silence, the only sounds their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridor. As they moved deeper into the ship, the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, each step taken feeling heavier, as if the ship was reacting to their presence. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the passage. Before them stood a large, circular chamber, its walls adorned with strange symbols and alien glyphs. In the center of the room was a pedestal, similar to the one they had seen before, but this one was different. It was larger, more intricate, and at its center was a spherical object, glowing with an ethereal light. Sarah approached cautiously, the others following behind her. The sphere seemed to hum with an energy they could feel deep in their bones, as if it were alive, vibrating with a power beyond understanding. It was as though the entire room was a conduit for the force within it. "What is this?" Alex whispered, his voice filled with awe. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the sphere. "But it's not the same as the last one. It feels different." Ben shifted uncomfortably. "And what's with these symbols? They're everywhere. This doesn't feel like a welcome party. It feels like a warning." Before Sarah could respond, a sudden voice rang out in the chamber. It was the same voice they had heard before, the one that had spoken to them through the ship. "You have come far. But this is the end of your journey. The price of knowledge is steep. You will face the consequences of your actions. The voice echoed through the chamber, its power palpable. The crew stiffened, their muscles tensing at the weight of the words. What does that mean? Ben asked, his hand moving again to his sidearm, though he knew it was useless. Are we supposed to just leave? The voice did not respond immediately. Instead, the sphere in the center of the room began to pulse more intensely, the light growing brighter, almost blinding. The walls of the chamber seemed to shake, and the floor beneath them vibrated. Alex stepped forward, his expression one of intense curiosity. We're not supposed to leave. This is a test. A trial. They said we would learn soon enough. We've seen something, we've felt something. Now we need to understand it. As he spoke, the glyphs on the walls began to glow, the symbols shifting and moving in ways that defied explanation. The room seemed to warp and twist, as if the very fabric of space was bending around them. Sarah felt her heart race as the ship's voice spoke again, this time more urgent. The architects have watched for eons. They have seen civilizations rise and fall. They have seen the weight of knowledge crush those unworthy to bear it. You are not immune. You must choose. Sarah's mind was racing. Choose what? What are we supposed to choose? Her voice cracked, her anxiety rising with each word. The sphere began to rise, slowly, almost majestically, as the light around it intensified. The room's temperature dropped suddenly, the chill creeping into their bones. Then, as if in response to Sarah's question, a new sound filled the chamber, a low hum that vibrated through the floor. The glyphs began to shift faster, the symbols spiraling, and then, with a sudden burst of energy, the entire room seemed to split apart. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the space around them collapsed, and the chamber fractured into 1,000 shimmering fragments. Her vision blurred, and she felt her body being pulled apart. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the face of her crew, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. And then, the world was gone. The world came rushing back in flashes. Sarah Granger's head was pounding, her vision blurry as her body struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The last thing she remembered was the crushing force of the black ship's voice, the sudden collapse of the chamber, and then the unbearable feeling of being pulled apart. She gasped, her lungs desperate for air, her heart racing. There was no way to tell how much time had passed, but the disorienting sensation of her body being thrown through space was slowly fading, replaced by a new, chilling reality. She could feel the cold floor beneath her palms, rough and metallic, pressing into her skin. Slowly, she pushed herself up, blinking as the world came into focus. Her crew was scattered around her, groaning and stirring. The chamber was gone, replaced by a dark, endless expanse of space. Is everyone all right? Sarah's voice came out hoarse, a whisper in the empty void that seemed to stretch infinitely around them. Alex Hernandez was the first to sit up, his face pale, his body trembling. What happened? He muttered, as if trying to make sense of the chaos. His hand went to his head, and he winced in pain. That was insane. Ben Parks cut him off, pushing himself to his feet. His eyes darted around the dark expanse. Where the hell are we? Sarah stood, feeling the disorienting pull of gravity, or rather, the lack of it. The absence of the ground beneath her feet made her stomach lurch. It took a moment for her to steady herself, to realize that they were floating in the center of what seemed to be a massive chamber. The walls of the space were alive, shifting, pulsating with faint lines of light, like veins running through some colossal organism. The room was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not merely a chamber. It was alive. She could feel it, its consciousness, its awareness of them. The black ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a part of something much bigger, much older than any of them could comprehend. What is this place? Alex whispered, his voice filled with awe. The walls of the chamber seemed to respond to his question. The dark void around them began to pulse with light, and strange, alien symbols began to appear on the walls. They shifted, moved, and changed before their eyes, as if the ship itself was speaking directly to them, communicating in a language they couldn't understand. But then, the voice, the one they had heard before, deep and omnipresent, filled the space around them. You have made your choice. The price of survival has been paid. The architects have seen your resolve. But now, you must face the consequences of your actions. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. It was the voice of the black ship, the architect's will, the force they were up against. The price of survival. Sarah repeated, more to herself than to anyone else. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning, like an ominous warning. The walls shifted once more, and a large opening appeared before them. It was a portal, a doorway to another part of the ship. Sarah didn't hesitate. She couldn't. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The consequences of their actions were about to unfold, and they had no choice but to follow. "Let's move," she said, her voice firm, though she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. Ben moved first, his military instincts kicking in. He stepped forward, eyes scanning the surroundings, his hand still resting on his weapon. But Sarah could see the hesitation in his stance. Even Ben, the tough security officer, was unsure of what lay ahead. They all were. The crew moved together, the narrow passageway beckoning them forward. As they walked, the walls seemed to pulse and ripple, as though the very structure of the ship was alive, reacting to their presence. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by the architects, but by something even more ancient, more powerful. Eventually, the narrow passageway opened into another vast chamber, even larger than the one they had just left. This room was filled with hundreds of glowing spheres, each suspended in midair. The spheres were of varying sizes, from small orbs to massive, planet-sized ones that seemed to float effortlessly in the air, their light casting eerie shadows on the walls. "It's like a collection," Alex murmured, stepping forward, his eyes wide with awe. "But, what are they? They're not like anything I've ever seen." Each sphere seemed to hum with a low, resonant sound, a vibration that echoed in the depths of Sarah's chest. The energy they emitted felt familiar, like the same pulse they had felt before, the same force that had connected them to the black ship. The spheres were alive. And they were waiting for something. But before anyone could speak, the voice boomed again, filling the chamber with its oppressive presence. "You are at the heart of the architect's domain. These spheres are the memories, the essence of civilizations long lost. The price of survival has not yet been paid in full. To proceed, you must choose. Will you embrace the knowledge within these spheres? Or will you turn away, leaving this place forever?" Sarah's mind raced. What was the voice asking? The choice to embrace the knowledge was tempting, but what would that cost them? Could they bear the weight of it? She turned to her crew, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and curiosity. Alex was the first to speak. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now. The architects, they've shown us something we can't ignore. But if we take their knowledge, what will it do to us? What will it do to humanity? Do we have a choice?" Ben replied, his voice low and strained. "The knowledge might be the key to survival. Or it could destroy us. But we won't know unless we take it." Sarah felt the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every instinct told her to be careful, to walk away. But they were already in too deep. The consequences of their actions had already begun to unfold, and there was no going back. "The architects have seen your hesitation," the voice said, its tone cold, almost mocking. "Choose now. There is no time left." The pressure was building, crushing them with the weight of the decision. Sarah could feel it, her heart racing, her breath shallow. She knew this was a turning point. The choice they made here would decide everything. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about what kind of future humanity would have, what kind of future they would create by embracing, or rejecting, what lay within these spheres. "I'll do it," Sarah said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I'll take the knowledge. I have to. We all do." Alex looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" Sarah nodded. "We don't have a choice. We have to move forward." Ben stepped forward, his voice firm. "Then let's do it. We'll see this through." With that, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped toward the nearest sphere. As her fingers brushed against the surface, a wave of energy washed over her, a torrent of images flooding her mind. She saw alien worlds, civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, the ebb and flow of the cosmos. And in the midst of it all, she saw the architects, beings of incomprehensible power, their forms shifting and changing, their presence everywhere and nowhere. The knowledge was overwhelming. It was too much for her to process all at once. She stumbled back, her head spinning, but the voice of the architects filled her mind, urging her to embrace it, to understand it. The price of survival is the price of understanding. You are not ready. But you will be. And then, the world around her shattered. The ship felt colder now. The oppressive atmosphere from the spheres, the energy, and the presence of the architects, it was all around them. The moment Sarah had touched the sphere, she had been overwhelmed by a flood of images, thoughts, and emotions. She had seen the universe as they had never seen it before, felt the vastness of time and space, and had glimpsed the secrets of the architects, secrets too dangerous to comprehend fully. And yet, despite everything, Sarah could feel the ship shifting. The once faint pulse of the black ship's energy had grown stronger, like the beating of a heart. The walls seemed to thrum with a deep, resonant hum, vibrating in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She knew they were not alone. The crew had all experienced the same overwhelming surge of knowledge. Alex had collapsed at the touch of the sphere, his body racked with tremors. Ben had been silent, his eyes glazed as though the weight of the knowledge was too much for him to bear. Even the steady, ever-calculated Sarah felt her world being torn apart. The spheres, now still and dimmed, had stopped pulsing. The void around them felt empty, like a vast chasm that was waiting for something to happen. Sarah pushed herself up from the ground, struggling to regain control over her senses. What the hell was that? Ben's voice was rough, his hands gripping his head as if trying to hold his sanity in place. What just happened to us? Something changed, Alex said quietly, his voice hollow, like a man speaking from a place far beyond where he was standing. His eyes flickered with a strange intensity. The black ship, it's alive in ways we didn't understand. We were never meant to understand. Sarah turned to him, her mind racing. No. We need to understand. If we're going to survive this, we have to. We have to know what we've gotten ourselves into. But there was no answer. The walls of the ship seemed to close in on them, the darkness pressing against them like a living force. The hum of the ship had intensified, filling their ears, vibrating through their bones. It was a signal. A signal that they were no longer alone. Before anyone could speak, the voice of the architects filled the chamber once again. You have embraced the knowledge. You have seen the truth. But the cost has only just begun. The black ship has chosen you. You are no longer mere humans. You are now part of the architect's will. Will you accept your fate, or will you fight it? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The voice was not one of comfort. It was cold, dispassionate, and final. It offered no choice. There was no room for rebellion. She could feel it in the very walls of the ship, in the air around her, in the pit of her stomach. They had been marked. Chosen. She glanced around at her crew. Ben's face was pale, his lips trembling with fear. Alex was staring into the distance, his eyes unfocused. They were broken, in their own way. The knowledge, the force they had tapped into, it had changed them. Changed them in ways they could not reverse. What does it mean, Sarah? Alex's voice was strained, his eyes flicking to hers. What do we do now? Sarah bit her lip, thinking quickly. The decision they had made was irreversible. They had touched the spheres, absorbed the knowledge. And now, the architects had claimed them. What that meant, she didn't know. What would happen to them? To Earth? There's no turning back, she said, her voice shaky but determined. But we can't just sit here, waiting for them to come for us. We need to find out what they want. Ben took a step forward, shaking his head. You're not listening to me. The architects don't care what we want. They've chosen us. There's nothing we can do to change that. I'm not giving up, Sarah retorted, her voice rising, taking on an edge of steel. We are not pawns in their game. If they want to control us, they'll have to come through me first. The words had barely left her lips when the floor beneath them rumbled, sending a shiver of dread through her body. The hum of the ship grew louder, its vibrations shaking the very bones of the crew. Sarah could hear a distant roar, the sound of something huge, something ancient, moving within the ship. The ship itself was waking up. It was responding to their challenge. The walls shifted once more, opening to reveal a new passageway, one that hadn't been there before. A dim, greenish light flickered at the end of the passage, casting eerie shadows against the walls. It was the only direction they could go. Where does that lead? Ben asked, his voice tense. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She knew what the ship wanted from them. It wanted them to follow. It wanted them to surrender. But she couldn't, not without understanding what was at stake. It's the only way forward, Sarah said, her voice grim. We have to face whatever is waiting for us. With no other choice, they moved forward. The passage was narrow and winding, twisting around corners that led them deeper into the heart of the ship. The air grew colder with every step, and the pressure on their chests seemed to increase as they walked. It was as though they were being drawn toward a singular point, something more than just the ship, something far older, far more dangerous. Finally, the passage opened into a vast chamber. It was like nothing Sarah had ever seen before. The chamber was alive with pulsating light, the walls shifting and undulating as though they were made of some organic substance. Strange, alien symbols floated in the air, swirling around them in a mesmerizing dance. At the center of the room stood a figure, tall, imposing, and shrouded in shadow. The figure's outline was vaguely humanoid, but it was impossible to discern any other details. It stood motionless, its presence radiating an ancient, primal power. You've arrived, the voice of the architects echoed through the chamber. You are the chosen. You have embraced the knowledge, and now you will fulfill your role. Sarah's heart raced. She could feel the power radiating from the figure, from the ship itself. She had no idea what the architects wanted from them, but one thing was clear, this was no ordinary encounter. This was the reckoning. What do you want from us? Sarah demanded, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. The figure remained silent for a moment, before it spoke again, its voice carrying a deep, resonant tone that seemed to reverberate through the very air around them. The black ship has chosen you to carry out a task, one that will shape the future of your species. You have been granted the knowledge, the power, but with that comes the responsibility to act. Act? On what? Ben demanded, stepping forward as well, his voice filled with defiance. What do you expect us to do? The figure's shadowed form seemed to flicker, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw its eyes, two bright, glowing orbs staring back at her. You will carry out the architect's will. You will be the bridge between humanity and the cosmos. You will unite the fragmented pieces of the universe, restoring what has been lost. The words were like a blow to the chest. Sarah's mind struggled to comprehend the weight of the task laid before them. Uniting the cosmos? What did that even mean? The figure moved, its shape shifting as it gestured to the walls around them. You are the future of humanity. You will transcend your limitations. You will become the force that reshapes the galaxy. The black ship hummed louder now, its energy resonating with Sarah's very core. She could feel it, this was the beginning of something far greater than they had ever anticipated. It was no longer just about survival. It was about something bigger than them, something that would affect every living being in the universe. Sarah turned to her crew, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision they had made. There was no going back. They had been chosen. They had been marked. The architects had plans for them, plans that they couldn't possibly fathom. We have to trust the ship, Sarah said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. We have no choice. We've already made our decision. Alex nodded, his face grim. What choice do we have? We follow it. We follow them. The hum of the black ship grew deafening, and Sarah took a step forward, toward the figure that had called them here. The ship was their fate now. The architects had set their course.